Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come at long last because we are about to talk about the main story of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. It's been honestly the most difficult video to make so far in terms of writing down and thinking and just stewing over what I wanted to convey. There will be videos for the characters and villains, the world, the gameplay, and more, but I just want to focus for now on that main story. Now, just before we start, I do want to warn you that there will be lots of spoilers, of course, for the game, and I'm not here to retell the story in full, but to discuss the pivotal moments in my journey going through the world of Ionios. So if you have yet to complete your journey in this brilliant world, please consider saving this video for another time. Those of you who do watch, I hope you all enjoy or can at least appreciate what I want to discuss. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and let's get stuck in. Uncompromising and unflinching. Those were the first words that popped into my head. This is a world where people are raised in and born from pods until they're at an age where they're capable to learn warfare. Everything they're taught for the next few years in some way, shape, or form is related to combating the enemy or maintaining the army in some way. In essence, these soldiers, from the moment they're born, and they're born at an age that's more rational in thought, mind you, that rationale is firmly constructed around the propaganda indoctrinated into their very way of life. Having only 10 years and being told that their life's duty, their honor, their entire being is for the glory of Keves, for the glory of Agnes, for their queen and their countrymen. That strong and heavy-handed use of propaganda was the first narrative grip for me, just as much as was the next part, meeting our main protagonist Noah, who's been the one filling us in on much of how this world operates, but also quite a lot more.
Cruel irony that it should mean eternity, because slowly but surely, our world is now dying. Even though we have yet to realize that fact.
Noah's role as Offseer is one of solemnity, one of mourning, and remembering those who've died, but it does so much more for our hero in particular. It attunes him closer with the concept of death. It allows him to scrutinize the justifications of the war. The musical element of it makes him question if he can compose and play songs other than the country's anthems. In short, he has more of an opportunity to think beyond the standard soldier's mindset, and it's these questioning doubts and concerns of his that not even Lanz or Uni have at the start that will ultimately allow him to break out of the yoke of the soldier mentality and think on his own. And we see that moment in the fight against Mio during the special mission in Alphato Valley.
Hang on. The fighting stopped. When did that... At this rate, one of us is going to get killed. No. Maybe both of us will. Something strange is going on. We shouldn't be fighting like this. We should run. Run. Was it me who just said that?
That moment where the stakes were all so real, yet everything around him was quiet. Vandam's appearance and seeming validation of Noah's concerns thereafter only strengthened his belief that fighting in order to live was just living in order to fight. The struggle that ensues with the first encounter with Mobius was fantastic, revealing a little more about our cast's predicament and the primary plot with Mio having only 3 months left to live before she passes on, but It's a scene after this that I hold very highly because it was the start of a very welcome precedent for the rest of the game, and that was their class introductions.
My name's Noah. Colony 9, Special Forces Unit. As you know, I'm an officer. These three, Lance, Uni, and Riku, are my long-term friends. Oh, and this is my passion. Someday I'd like to play my own melodies. Not just the same old music that I learned in training. Okay.
What is this? Feels like a surprise inspection or something.
It'll help, in the long run.
Come on, man. Really?
It's these quiet and rather enjoyable moments that not only strengthened my affinity for 3's cast, but also for the characters themselves, and I'll forever praise the decision to provide the player with the entirety of the primary cast for pretty much the entirety of the journey. Here, the propaganda that was painstakingly driven into each and every fiber of our characters' beings, torn out so gutturally as to leave the cast confused, hungering for answers, wary of one another. This scene is but the first of several in the game that I love to death, because between the game's polished and explosive high-stakes cutscenes are these smaller moments where they offer the cast the opportunity to break down those rigid prejudices and lower their guards around one another, first inch by inch and then greater still as they allow for natural, humanistic behaviors to settle in during their journey. Uni bonding with the girls a little more easily, while Noah and Tyon were tentative with one another. I think Lance was perhaps the greatest show in this, so headstrong and still trying desperately to cling on to the way of Kevez, despite knowing that his new way of life is incompatible with the past. His fiery and hot-headed temper turning into bouts against Tyon's sharp tongue was a joy to see early on, as was seeing those moments slowly turn into times of friendship and better understanding. Flash forward a little bit to the confrontation with Kay, and while I will definitely be talking more about Mobius in general in another video, I'd still like to say that the theatrics of Mobius as a whole pair up really nicely with both their view of their dominance over life in Aionios and their incredibly over-the-top grandeur and theatrical demeanor. In the lead up to the last phase of his fight, however, there's a moment where the group must balance on a very thin line. The enemy is too great, and destroying the flame clock of Colony 4 might weaken Mobius, but it could also kill the soldiers that they're trying to protect. Noah making that quick, decisive call, here full well knowing that it could end disastrously, is what further solidified my enjoyment of this character for me. Thankfully, it doesn't end in tragedy, and Colony 4 becomes our first liberated colony, and the game opens up so much right here. Again, points of discussion for another video, but now we have something really interesting. For the first time ever in the history of Aionios, there are soldiers who are free. There is no push to fight, no command order going through, and all of these soldiers stationed here can think fully, independently for the first time. And to make matters even more awkward, when they look at their liberators, they see Mio, Senna, and Tyon among them, Agnians, their sworn enemies. And this is where the brilliance of the world building begins to come into play, in that each and every one of these NPCs, these people, are thinking completely differently. Some of them are grateful, some of them are confused on what to do next, some just want to go about trying to do their daily routine because they still have their stations to attend to. And then there are some that are going to cling to that hatred, their ignorance and disgust towards Agnes, because that's what they've been taught their whole life.
What is this?
It used to belong to my friend. He always wore it till last year. Yes, he died, fighting against Colony Psi. You animals killed him. Shot him right here. Clean through.
You're wrong! We're actually from Colony Gam... Mimi, what? If that's what you want, go ahead and shoot. It's not like I'm a hard target.
Now we're talking. Oh, what? You're nearly done anyway. Well then keep your lousy embers. Die today or in 3 months' time, not much difference. Just mind you don't get poisoned before your time's up.
What a jerk. So uncalled for.
Senna, it's fine. He was right. We did kill people. Maybe not his friend, but certainly others.
We had no choice. If we hadn't have, we'd be goners.
We had no choice. Yeah, that was clear until now. But not anymore. Right?
Uh-huh.
There's a chance we can make amends. Even if we're misunderstood.
On the house. Eat your fill, friend.
Huh?
We're dirt rank, remember? Life ain't easy here. But you did help. Besides, you gave us a choice. The choice not to fight. Now, we won't have to take others' lives. I've wished for this. And you made it true. Thanks for that.
This was a great moment for Mio as a character. We know about the remaining time she has left, yet so far we've only gotten a handful of cutscenes that, some while adorable, we don't really have a chance yet to know her true feelings or what she thinks of about the world or what she's doing or what Ouroboros is doing. This was an excellent starting vehicle for conveying her character, that she would begin with this reserved persona, but as time ticks on closer to her final hour, as she confronts more situations and new experiences within the world, that we're going to see her become more vocal. We're going to get to know her more as a person. The next part of this begins to show more in Mac the Wildwood, and I know I'm skipping Yorn, but I'll bring him up later. By the time the group makes camp in Mactha and learn of the Queen of Keva's plan to attack Colony 4, a month has already passed canonically, and that realization, that feeling that she is closer to her death seeps in. Her body begins to become more fatigued, almost as if to physically portray that her time is approaching, yet Mio keeps this strong face. It's not until a one-on-one with Uni where she starts to take off that mask, and then she grippingly lets loose on Noah the very next day. And it was this moment where I finally felt that connection start to form between these two characters. Not just the fact that they've been fighting together, or the power of Ouroboros lets them interlink so their lives are intrinsically connected or anything like that, but Noah hearing her voice and acknowledging those fears directly for the first time. Mio fully telling both Noah and the player her deepest thoughts and worries. One of the simplest but most meaningful human experiences, and I need to stress it as that, a human experience, something almost foreign for the majority of people living in Ionios. And I truly think that if it weren't for her exchanges with both Uni and especially Noah, if this next scene just stood by itself without that build-up, even after what occurred with Ethel and Kamaravi, I don't feel that this would have hit as nearly as hard.
Look upon us and tremble before perfection! You'll writhe in agony before we...
Mio?
Stop! Stop toying with everyone's lives! What did they ever do to you? Why? All they wanted was their wish to be realized. You turned everything into a game, cast them away like dolls. These are our lives here. They're not some toys you can just play with.
Proceeding to the Kevis capital was excellent. Personally, I wish that Ashera wasn't accessible prior to the group's mission to stop the Annihilator, because I didn't like the idea of the group making a scene right in front of the capital, but it's just a small quirk with how the game's side stuff is set up. It's not that big an issue. And here's where storytelling within Xenoblade games absolutely shines. We have those few questions raised with Consul K, a few questions raised with Yorin, and then the first major turning point hits. The Golden Console, that gut feeling within Mio and especially Noah, the lost numbers making use of the chaos to take up more pods, and topping it off, the Queen is nothing more than a puppet. Her mechanical visage cruelly and swiftly tossed aside, making a very clear, very cold and poignant message that the whole of the nation of Kevis means nothing, and as ever, Mobius stands at the heart of the world. A quick little side bit here, I also had a lot of personal elation when I got to see that the Queen wasn't who she was. You can see in a lot of my past speculation videos that I was really hoping this wasn't Armelia sitting on the throne, throwing her subjects into the flames of war. In any case, this is the point in Xenoblade games that I love so much. We get to a point where we should have questions answered, and then instead there's some form of epiphany that throws wide the gates to so many more questions. In my head, I think of this moment like coming across Zanza for the first time at Prison Island in Xenoblade 1. And while there are still more mysteries in our way, it's after this turning point that those questions begin to start getting answered. And what a way that they did this. I don't think anyone could have remotely prepared for what they threw at us with the city. Everything from the harsh welcome the cast received, learning the origins and governing structure of the city, the founders, how people live their lives and fight Mobius, the reflexes our group has on seeing the children and the elderly, and yes, learning how babies are made. Our journey started with just one question: who was the real enemy? And we got more than we ever could have asked for. The level of detail is just staggering. I thoroughly enjoyed seeing that not everything is idyllic, that there's internal resistance between key leaders, there's a rich history in a world that would otherwise discard it because of the war propaganda, but the simple fundamental aspects of humanity, growing up and starting a family, living out a full life, to soldiers that have only 10 years if they're lucky. It's such a strong awakening in our cast that not only answers some of those questions that they were looking for, but reinvigorates their motivation in confronting Mobius and changing the world for the better.
This is how it should be. This is human nature. We are born defenseless, grow up. Then those who find a spouse create new life together, age, then return to the Earth.
Before I continue on, I also want to address the main character side stories since they start to unlock around this point. Again, something I'll save for another video, but I do want to say that I personally wish they were all mandatory in order to progress the main story at certain junctions. Each of these stories further expand not only for our characters, but for the world and the story as a whole, and the fact that Consul X won't even show up later on in the game without having done Uni's side story is, for me at least, a very jarring choice to have made. But for now, back to Chapter 5 and the first part of Chapter 6, because they're honestly inseparable really, and I have to say that this section of the game right here, from the very introduction to the city all the way to the resolution after the eclipse, is without a doubt one of my favorite segments that I've gone through in just about any game ever, not just Xenoblade, but gaming entirely. I can still recall that stream where I was with you guys. I had been on with you all till 2 in the morning, and Chapter 5 just concluded. We'd been through those 3 days of Ligarte prison, which already blew away my expectations by having us sit through those 3 harsh days. There was no way I couldn't see how that didn't resolve, and we pushed on till almost 5 in the morning that night because just as I was picking back up my expectations and going off of what every other game had taught me, they just completely pulled the rug from under. Watching our party struggle through a whole month in the clutches of the enemy, I was convinced that something was going to happen. The group would be able to escape somehow. City was going to send in some lost numbers. They were going to come on a rescue mission. But no one came at all. And both En and Shania rubbing the salt in the wound, constantly adding to the feeling of despair and helplessness, was the definition of brutal. And it all comes down to the day of the eclipse, and we're forced to watch Mio ascend. And even as those golden motes began to appear, as En still delights in tormenting Noah, I still truly thought there was no possible way that this was going to go on. But it did! And that moment that it hit me, that she passed, it was so surreal that it beggared belief. And it was only at this moment, at Noah's point of death, where we finally see that epochal moment that all the Xenoblade protagonists have, where they have this time of insight and reaffirmation, but also showing the struggle of En, the burdens and choices that he made that led him astray into becoming Mobius, and those moments where their kid had to watch both of his parents pass. It's all so emotionally charged, and yet it delivers in adding so much more context into much of the existing narrative. So well done. And leading into the big twist that our Mio had exchanged consciousness with M, and it was M that was sent off. The sheer joy in that moment of recognition. Even after ruminating on all those feelings built up between the ceremony and Noah's epiphany, even now it was just indescribable. En's near mental collapse on realizing who it was that had passed on, Noah gaining access to the Sword of the End, the fights that ensued with both En and the false Queen of Agnes, and the incredibly disturbing ploys and twists with Shania, a character who I think is sheer brilliance and bold in this world, completely honestly with you guys. All of that concluded such a masterful arc in the game's story.
I've had it. I've had it up to here. Shania! Drop it! This isn't what I meant by dad! Don't misunderstand! This is the beginning! Shania!
Are you ready, Senna?
Noah.
This is the fate that Shania chose. It isn't the end. Like she said herself, this is the beginning. Come on. Up you get. I don't know if it'll reach her. But still, Senna will do all we can.
The Mio side story will be talked about later on in a side story video, but I am fully glad that this one was a mandatory one for the story. Hers was probably my favorite, and Miyabi was a joy to finally meet, while concluding the last of Mio's loose ends and letting that character get the reaffirmation she needed. And then of course we found the Cloud Keep a little bit too fast for my liking personally. I wish that Capricorn was at least twice the size that it ended up being, but we got there, and that familiar motif that all of us who played through Xenoblade Chronicles 2 love so dearly just starts to ring. And she's there waiting for us, the real Nia. And Lord knows when she got hit by that bolt, I swear I both panicked, but I also sort of knew she would be fine because of her powers, but still, D and J were going down this time once and for all. And they did, the first of the real main antagonists to conclude their parts of the story. Dirk ended up feeling quite good as a villain, if only for being a better written Mumkar in my opinion, but that unshaken and unsettling atmosphere that he had, paired up with finding about his past, made him all the better for it. Meanwhile, Yorn's resolution actually hit a lot harder than I expected, and I quite appreciate Monolith Soft in choosing to include characters like him and Shania, two characters who both despised their lot in the world and saw the grass was greener on the other side of the way that Ionios was set up. Honestly, as the one antagonist that I actually was really unnerved with when I first saw him introduced, learning about his past, how it changed him, the pain he felt over and over again, nearly breaking when all those emotions coalesced during his transformation into Mobius, his resolution was quite fitting, with allowing him in letting him both control something for once and also allowing him that rest that he deserved. And then of course it's time to meet the Queen.
Oh, that's good. So it worked after all. Your Majesty. My name is Nia, and I am the Queen of Agnes, one wing of Ionios.
We get that late game exposition dump that accompany all Xenoblade games about 3/4 of the way through, this time through Nia, and I've heard many people say that they weren't particularly fond of this one. It certainly didn't have anything that elevated the stakes or brought out something entirely out of left field, and I think that it was a more tame lore reveal than usual, which is why some fans may have had that disappointment. But for me personally, this is where I had that unfortunate first bump in the road, so to speak, where I felt something was a little missing. Not in the way that there was something left out, because I'm sure the story will explain it later on, but just because something felt purposely omitted. I wanted to know how Nia was chosen as queen. I wanted to know how light became that first medium of language, wanting to know more about the origins of Ouroboros, but I felt like those questions weren't going to have answers revealed, and it left me wanting a bit more. But then we get the one quest, and honestly, this is my least favorite part in the story, the mandatory quest for the 6 mystical MacGuffin shards that will combine to reveal Origin, the enemy's domain. If there's one thing that I, again, personal opinions on air here, really don't like to see in video games, it's when a MacGuffin, a mystical plot device, is thrown right in at the end of the story as a means of justifying something, whether it's in trying to extend the playtime or to make up some random and quick means of defeating the big bad. I just don't like them. All the more so in this instance, where some of them were incredibly easy to obtain, while one shard directly threw us into Noah's side story. And out of all the places in the game where they had tucked away Chris, it had to be in this side story of all things. He was probably the one character the game did dirty, in my opinion. He felt like he needed more time to be set up, whether that just be more callbacks from Noah or at the very least some prior intervention in the main story, just something. But I digress. We move on to Origin, and what a stage. The spectacle of just getting there, mixed in tandem with the global assault truly beginning, something that again occurs in every Xenoblade game. The world is going ablaze, but we are stronger, we are united, the people of Ionios resisting the constraints of its creators at long last. Let's move on along to the first confrontation in the enemy's lair, the final showdown with N, standing in our way of saving the real Queen Melia. Frankly, I was mixed with N after our confrontation at the Agnes capital. I hadn't felt that need for the character's involvement beyond that point. But by this point in the game, there was a new mode of resolution the game was clearly pushing for, and that was redemption.
Void. That's just your grief. What? It's called sadness, and we came here for you, to honor M's wishes, and to rescue you from your sorrow. To rescue me. What meaning does that tripe hold for me? Now that all is past, why should it matter? If you don't know, then let me teach you. I'll drag you with me, deep into the void, to the depths of despair.
The realization that N had become the embodiment of his regrets, consumed by them, and that acknowledgement by Noah, Mio's consolations, his final moments being acceptance, and again, like M's, like Yoren's, like many of those that we've seen along the way, allowing him that affirmation and rest, it opened my eyes to the depth of his character and left me with an overall more fond impression for this tragic figure that N ultimately became. And with him no longer against us, Queen Melia Antiqua is free. The high Entian motif sweeps in. We hear her words of wisdom describing Z as a coalesced concept, unwavering and implacable. And then again, there's that sense of intentional omittance given in her nodding to Riku, which irks me so much as someone who enjoys Riku, yet as a character I can't really get that sense of anything anymore with him, other than someone who will hopefully be explained fully in the DLC story to come. Like, why did he have the Sword of the End to begin with? Why would he withhold advice and info until precise moments in the story? Why the nod? And frankly, what's going on with Napon in the story in general? But I digress, a discussion for another time. Albeit X only showed up if you did Uni's story, their confrontations just stooped me. They had almost no resolution that addressed their character in any way. Both their powers and motives were never really fully explained, and the most that I personally can think of is just that their being is intrinsically tied to Z, hence Z's resolution is theirs as well. The final descent into the theater, though, adorned with the sight of those massive core crystals, was magnificent and added a nice touch into the lore of Origin. And then there's the door, there's the point of no return, the final confrontation. Save now, it's time.
All humanity yearns for it, the endless now. That is why I'm here, you'll find. My existence alone, it is proof and evidence. Young, spirited people, trading lives, aiming for new, ever loftier heights with each new day. That explosive motive power is something we lack. The essence of life. And we are here to express ourselves as an embodiment of life.
So that's it? That's what you're getting at? Just for that, you gave those two an impossible choice? Is that why you made Yoren and Chris into Mobius?
Of course. is for the wild. It's because it amuses me. The action-packed drama of your lives. We are its foremost audience. Now then, play it out for me. What will the next act entail? Bereavement or revenge? A revolution, perchance? This world is never boring. Not while your lives continue to make it so effervescent.
The will to choose our actions moment to moment, and if you dare denounce that common right, we will defy you to live in a future over which you lay no claim!
The battle with Z, or rather as British pronounce it, Zed, himself was nothing short of one of the greatest spectacles that I've seen in quite some time in gaming. The theater filling up with consoles as a reaffirmation of Zed's steadfast will, the shackles binding each of our party members fully broken after a journey, confronting their pasts, what they choose to live in for the now, and fighting for the future. Z's composure chipping slowly away until all is laid bare for the entire world to see. And it's the combined will of Aionios, every being now hand in hand defying that reality. The queens joining in the fray alongside those who've joined us during our journey, adding even further to the grandeur of what's unfolding until all that's left of Zed is that core desire that created him. His true end, brought on by the redeemed remnants of N and M within Noah and Mio, paving the way to the moment that Origin was always meant to reach, was just utterly fantastic. And I genuinely had no qualms with Zed as a boss. Single concept bosses are nothing new, least of all within Xenoblade games. However, as a character, and this is perhaps my only real complaint apart from the ambiguity built on after Chapter 5 and the MacGuffin stuff, is that I think Zed deserved more time and a little more presence. So much of the game is spent fighting the other faces of Mobius, yet Zed stayed an observer, and I think a good comparison would be to Malos in Xenoblade 2. Singular in purpose from his conception, yet highly active in achieving his goals, being present fairly periodically within the story, not just cackling back in headquarters. I suppose one reason might be because Zed already has that power, whereas Malos sought it, but I felt that between his limited exposure to the player and the characters, and his singular algebraic desire as Mobius, there was a bit more that I would have liked to have seen. What's more important to me though is that even this didn't take away from the conclusion. Nothing could take away what I felt in that ending. No matter how many times I watch it, no matter how many times I tell myself that it was bittersweet, but things worked out. The worlds will unite. They'll all find somehow a way to be together with one another again, one day. I still tear up watching those worlds separate, seeing our cast fatefully torn apart. And it's an ending that I'll cherish. It's a fitting conclusion to the saga that all began with one man's experiment, and the end to a trilogy that has stuck with me since I first discovered Xenoblade Chronicles a decade ago.
I see you peacefully, you're in your dreams. Everything seems calm and free. I know if we want this warmth to last forever again, let's go back to that moment of death. I see you smiling there, so peacefully and cheerfully talking
I promise!
Me too! One day! I promise!
This is the truth of our world. Memories melt in the morning light, and then a new day begins. Roads stretch out before us. So many paths. Which do you choose? That's up to you. Sometimes you might run astray. You'll stop, maybe cry in frustration. But you know, that's all right. For the roads, they go on without end. So look up, face forward, toward your chosen horizon. And just walk on.
My conclusion to Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is this, and I feel that this is something that will resonate with a lot of fellow players who've also gone through both of the prior entries. It's that 3 story is fantastic because it holds up perfectly well on its own, but it also just betters both 1 and 2. As someone with hundreds upon hundreds, maybe even like over 1,000 hours at this point in both the lands of Bionis Mechanis and also in Aldrest, it's not just the zones and the musical references, but the motifs, the symbology, the lessons, ideals, morals, friendships, everything that those games strove to tell all live on in some way, shape, or form in this game. And that elevates those messages and emotions in 3 to even greater heights. It's a game that both is better because of those past titles, but also the main story of 3 gives back to those games in the same manner. I don't know where Monolith Soft will take the series from here. I personally hope that some of the DLC will firmly wrap up the loose ends that have been left, maybe even moving forward in time to where our group finally can be with one another again. But all of those moments in the journey throughout Ionios, those moments of levity, those moments of hardship, everything, even the parts that fell a little bit off, that just instinctively and viscerally allowed me to attach to these characters in ways that few stories ever hope to strive for. I wouldn't have had it go any other way, really. But that was just my journey through the main story of Ionios, and there's quite a lot more to discuss, but please let me know, how was this journey for you? Thank you very much for your time in watching this video. Thank you to those of you who joined me on this journey as I was streaming it. And until next time, as always, have a great day.
Oh.
Noah! What are you doing, man? They'll start the fireworks without us.
Get a move on already, or all the good spots will be taken.
Exactly, so come on, move it!
Sorry, I zoned out for a sec. I'm coming.